to order. Mr. Wilborn, will you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Representing Educational District 5 and Board Chair, Ms. Erica Mitchell. She's joining us online. Representing Educational District at
Yes, thank
Large.
you, President.
I'm sorry? Representing Educational District at Large, seat 7, and Chairman of the Policy Review Committee, we have Mr. Alfred Sherry Brooks.
Present.
Representing Educational District at Large, seat 8, Ms. Cynthia Briscoe Brown.
Present.
Also present with us, we have our Superintendent, Dr. Brian Johnson. And before we get started, we want to just say on behalf of the board office, happy Bosses Day to our board members and our superintendent. Thank you for everything you all do. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to defer that happy Bosses Day to all the students at APS because they are the ultimate bosses. I will now entertain a motion to approve the August 27, 2025 Policy Review Committee minutes.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. So moved by board member, first moved by board member Briscoe Brown, second by board member Chair Mitchell. Is there a motion to approve the October 16th, 2025 Policy Review Committee meeting agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Moved by board member Briscoe Brown, seconded by board member Mitchell. We will now review the policies on the agenda. Is Ms. Long with us virtually?
I am
Okay.
here virtually. Good
Thank you.
afternoon, everyone. So good to see you. I'm taking advantage of fall break and at home supporting my student as he does college application.
As you should.
Yes, thank you. But we wanted to take things a little bit out of order from the printed agenda and start with a presentation that relates to legislation and work that was done at the Capitol earlier this year. SB 123 is a bill, it was a bipartisan supported bill that was designed to support school districts and social workers as they work to strengthen student attendance. And so we have joining us today our very able and capable social work services team led by Dr. Jackie Anthony. Dr. Patricia Ford is here, as well as Alicia Kirby. And they just wanted to spend some time talking you through not just this legislation, but how it aligns with work that team has already been doing around student attendance. So I will kick it off to Dr. Anthony just for a few minutes of a presentation to you all.
Thank you for that, Ms. Long. Do you all see my presentation or are you all controlling the presentation?
No, Dr. Anthony, you're controlling the presentation.
All right, thank you for that. So good afternoon, board members, Dr. Johnson and APS family. I am Dr. Jacqueline Anthony, Director for Social Work Services, and along with Alicia Kirby, who is one of our social work coordinators, we thank you for the opportunity to share how Senate Bill 123 is being put into action. It focuses on compliance, building a positive attendance future, and ensuring consistency across schools. All right, so before we get started, I want to ground today's presentation in one of our district's core focus areas. We are caring for every child. This drives everything that we do. Today's presentation will be supporting one of our key objectives, which is expanding strategies that reduce chronic absenteeism so that every student has the opportunity to learn, grow, and succeed. So here's a quick roadmap of what we will cover. We will provide an overview of Senate Bill 123, recommended revisions to the attendance policy as a result of this Senate bill. Attendance work in progress, we want to share with you the work that's in progress right now and the district attendance review team. And then we want to provide you with a checklist that basically provides guidance to schools regarding the implementation of this bill. So what is Senate Bill 123? It is legislation that was introduced in Georgia to reform how school attendance issues are handled. It was written and it was subsequently passed to address the growing issue of chronic student absenteeism in the state of Georgia. Last school year, well, actually in 2024, Georgia's chronic absenteeism rate hit 21.3%. with districts like Atlanta Public Schools reaching 34.5%, of students missing 18 days or more of school each year. Also, Georgia's laws were stagnant. It hadn't been updated since 2007, which left gaps in addressing chronic absenteeism. The student impact, we know that chronic absenteeism harms learning. It fuels literacy gaps and lowers graduation rates. And then it emphasizes support over punishment, really understanding the root causes of absenteeism, intervening early, and aiming for fair and constructive responses rather than punitive measures. This bill includes early intervention requirements for schools, and it moves away from criminalizing parents for student absences by encouraging community and school collaboration to support families. And so what we've done is we've unpacked for you key elements of the bill that supports this. One of the elements is that it prohibits schools from expelling students due to absenteeism alone. Also, schools with a chronic absence rate of 15% or higher must establish an attendance review team. Districts with a chronic absent rate of 10% or more must establish a district review team. All districts must have a written attendance protocol by June 1st, 2026. And then schools are tasked with developing intervention plans for chronically absent students. Why does this matter? Again, chronic absenteeism impacts students' learning and achievement. Early intervention prevents disengagement and dropout. And then strong attendance supports school improvement and state accountability measures. So we are recommending that our school system's attendance policy be updated to truly support students and comply with this state law. We are requesting that we consider defining terms like what is chronic absenteeism, which we know is missing 10% or more of enrolled days in school for any reason. Also including other definitions such as truancy, unexcused absences, excused absences within our policy. And we are asking this because without clear language, schools, families, and the community as a whole can interpret attendance rules inconsistently. We also recommend including language that aligns with Senate Bill 123, which requires a chronic absence review team, which we are calling CART, in schools that have absenteeism rate of 15% or higher. We're also asking that we include Georgia compulsory attendance school law and the eligibility enrollment law, which will lay the legal foundation for student attendance and enrollment. And then finally, we are recommending that the policy includes language that aligns our attendance practices with the Georgia Department of Education's multi-tiered system of support framework, because using a tiered approach to support students before student attendance issues escalate promotes a proactive, data-driven system that meets students where they are. And one of the reasons why we believe this is important is because, of course, Senate Bill 123 requires action. The new state law mandates school-level attendance teams and tiered supports, and our policy should reflect that. We believe policy holds weight, while regulations interpret policy. Without it being within policy, enforcement and consistency suffer over time. It makes it clearer for families. Well-written policy helps parents understand how our practices align with state law. And then equity and consistency. Updated language ensures fairness across schools, and it strengthens our alignment with Georgia multi-tiered systems of support.
So now I'm going to share a little bit about how we're ahead of the game, if you will, on implementing the measures for SB 123. Our schools for the past few years now have had attendance teams that help to mitigate attendance concerns. The past name was SAC, it was the Student Attendance Committee, and we converted it to the Chronic Absence Review Team to be more in line with the legislation, but also to kind of stand apart in our practices and to make sure that we're meeting those standards. APS SST, which was our WCI, they also help to support attendance, not that they haven't in the past, but we work closer together outside of the silos to ensure that when teams are sitting down to address academic or behavioral concerns, they're also looking at attendance to make sure that there are strategies put in place. So when you're creating an academic plan, the student is actually there to implement or benefit from that plan. We're also seeing a boost in our incentives and our climate and culture in our schools. When you walk in these schools, you're seeing excitement about attendance. You're seeing boards with attendance themes. You're seeing students highlighted for improvement or perfect attendance. This all helps to build a better culture and climate, but also helps to raise awareness about attendance, and schools are doing a great job in increasing that activity. We also use the data points from Infinite Campus, APS Graphs, and Everyday Labs, our teams and other groups, to make sure that we're addressing attendance from where the impact is hitting us most, whether it's specific students where we're creating customized intervention plans, whether it's looking at trends that are happening. Maybe certain schools are having students that do not come right after a break. If weather is impacting, if transportation is impacting. So we're using data to make sure that we're creating the best strategies and interventions and not using a cookie cutter structure. And then lastly on this slide, the Attendance Collaborative Task Force, which has been in existence for a while. We just renamed it last school year. But this just helps us come together as departments and divisions to look at policy, practice, and system gaps, identifying what they are and seeing where we can exact change. And hence, this is how we came up with needing to include or implement SB 123 within our policy. Next slide. So we have a protocol, attendance protocol that is for the district. It informs what practices should happen in schools, but it's currently under review. So what we did is extracted information from the protocol so that schools could have the tiered supports broken down while we're reviewing the entirety of the protocol. So they have all the steps from tier 1, 2, and 3 to help guide what's happening at those attendance teams. And they have structure as far as how to address when a student misses just one day, how to address when they get to the 8th day, and what those interventions would look like. As far as CART implementation, since we made the shift from SAC to CART, there are trainings that began in July to talk about how the team can be more effective and efficient, making sure that teams aren't just coming together to check the box that they met, but that they actually know how to pull students that need to have that additional intervention and how to move students from that list to back to coming more frequently, and also using that time to ensure that they know how to use the data to make those decisions. We've been collaborating with student intervention to make sure that when we're going into schools, we're speaking the same language. When we're sitting at the tables with those teams that are reviewing attendance, we know what we're seeing and how to recommend the best practices for them to get through their lists and help to see outcomes. And also with exceptional education, we've met, there's an SOP that still needs to be approved, but we created it so that students that have an IEP will make sure before withdrawing them for lack of attendance or referring them to court that they have had due diligence met. So that collaboration will be key. Then we have SIS, who's working with, I put myself, but working with our social work department and looking at those root causes that were identified through the teamwork. Most of them were social workers, but anyone from the team could take this survey to show what types of absences have been impacting schools and certain clusters, And we're using that to drill down to create better interventions because we want to be more intentional about the work that we're doing as a team. And then we have, per this legislation, it asks that we have intervention plans created. Well, we have our student attendance support plan that we've had in play for a while. It's a tier 2 support for those that serve on the CART teams. They use it to help identify what the barriers are. You can use it with students, you can use it with parents. And once you identify those root causes, you have a menu of supports for tier 1 and tier 2. Here's a timeline of the things that should have occurred since July 1, 2025, which is that the SB 123 went into effect. As of November 1st, 2025, the first attendance and climate committee meeting should have taken place. We are active members of this climate committee. They have been in position for, I would say, at least 3 years. I know I've served on it for 3 years. And then lastly, that as of June 1st, 2026, the attendance protocol should be in place. And when I say they, I'm speaking of the county. They have the attendance climate committee that meets every quarter. And then the attendance protocol, our district was instrumental in getting that completed and passed. And it's used as a model for other counties currently that still have work to do in that area. Next slide. So as mentioned before, we're using those tiered supports. We just wanted to make sure that you understood what they were. Tier 1 is the universal prevention. That some of the examples were the attendance campaigns, and which included our poster contest, which was a tier 1 support. Then tier 2 is early interventions for absences between 3 and 7, the unexcused. And then the tier 2 support was the student attendance support plan. That's one of them. And then tier 3 intensive supports, students who miss 8 or more unexcused days, those students are referred to the school social worker for more targeted supports. And sometimes after we've exhausted most of the interventions, if there's no improvement, then we may refer to juvenile court if they're in middle school or high school. If they're in elementary, then the referral goes to DFACS. On the CART team, you'll have your administrator, social worker, counselor, and other support staff in the building who serve your school. You're recommended to meet weekly. We only had 6 schools who did not meet the criteria for meeting weekly. Then we have what we do is progress monitoring, which is reviewing the data, identifying those root causes and tailoring those interventions, using those support plans to do so, and then measuring effectiveness so that we can move those students off those lists and continue to celebrate their coming to school. The district review team will include representatives from student services, exceptional education, transportation, SIS, cluster soups, and various departments and divisions as needed. We'll meet monthly. Our first meeting is October 23rd, next week. And then we'll review data, assign interventions, identify subcommittees as needed, and develop the plans to identify schools to help hold them accountable for these measures that are identified to run CART. Our final checklist is the final revisions, to the attendance protocol, establish attendance review teams, use the data to monitor and support students, remembering to engage families early and often, and focus on solutions, not punishment. Thank you for your time, for allowing this presentation. I guess it'll be a moment for questions if that's appropriate at this time.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anthony, for that presentation. At this point, do any of my colleagues have any questions? And I'm sure there are. All right. We have Board Member Briscoe Brown first, and I'm not sure if Board Member Mitchell has questions as well.
Okay. Well, I'll get started while we figure that out. Thank you for this very thorough presentation. I just have a few questions and comments. The first one is just to make sure that I understand what we're trying to accomplish here. The first part of your presentation referred to several items that I think you said you would like to see included in policy. However, the policy before us, policy JB, really doesn't seem to have any revisions except the parental notification that's required by SB 123. Do you plan to handle those others as part of administrative regulations, or do we need to include them in policy JB?
I'd like to jump in if that's okay, board members. What you have before you are, yes, edits to the policy that really just speak to parental notification. But I wanted to bring those, and that's language that came from the Georgia School Board Association. Those are their recommended changes to the policy based on their read of the legislation. However, I wanted to bring this in-depth presentation and conversation this afternoon so as to include you all as a committee on more of the substantive changes that our social work team is recommending. Those substantive changes that are outlined early in their presentation are also aligned with the legislation, and I think they are correct that it's important to elevate to board policy, not just administrative regulation, but to elevate to board policy certain provisions like the definition for chronic absenteeism and some of the strategic items that are within their recommendations for policy language. The legislation did not give school districts a specific deadline for adopting a new policy. So we can do a first read of just the parental notifications revisions this month, come back with the more substantive revisions that are recommended by the social work team for a second read, and then prepare this for final approval for the full board. I guess that will probably take us to January or so. But that way you all as a committee can really talk through with the folks who do this work some of those substantive changes that they want to the policy and why they want it in policy as opposed to admin reg.
So to be clear, we're not proposing to move this on to the full board in November. We're going, this is a first pass, so to speak. And
that's right.
Next month, we'll add the additional items that were recommended in the presentation. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Given you all's, as a committee, given you all's general agreement with those additional substantive items.
Okay. Then I just have a couple of questions about the part we've already added. On parental notification of student absences. The first one is just an observation, and that is that the first word of the first sentence of the new language that starts "the school system shall provide," I think is missing the word notice, because it doesn't seem, it just says the school system shall provide to the parent when the student has 5 unexcused absences.
Yeah.
I think it should
You're
say the
right.
school system shall provide notice.
Notice when. Yep, I see what you mean right there.
Yeah.
Yes. Make that addition.
And the question about that language is, I know that we often struggle to notify parents or guardians, caregivers, because we don't have correct address information. Do we need to outline what 2 reasonable attempts to notify the parent are? And do we, a certified mail is fine, but if we don't have a correct address, the certified mail's gonna come back to us. The parent may not pick it up, and yes, we'll do it first class. I'd like to see us send it via first class mail and certified mail, which was my protocol when in my law firm, because you often, if the parent doesn't pick up the certified mail, if the first class doesn't come back, at least we have some chance. But it seems to me that notifying the parent is very important here. And so I'd like to see a little more fleshed out as to how we propose to do that.
So Dr. Anthony, how does this work in real life in terms of our schools sending this notice out to families? What works? Where are our challenges? And is there policy language that can capture what we need to do?
So I think we're very blessed this year to have Everyday Labs send out our letters. They send the 3, 5, and 8-day letters for us. We also have a no contact letter that we've had since 2016. So if families, if those letters are not returned, we know that more than likely they still live at the address. We can send out that no contact letter, which basically shares with a parent. We would have to send that out, not Everyday Labs, which lets them know, hey, we had a meeting regarding your child. We've developed some strategies and interventions. Please feel free to contact us. We'd like to discuss with you further what that means to help your child's and improve your child's attendance. Now, the law doesn't say how, but we can also make calls and document those calls in the contact log. We can send an email if we have a good email for the parent. But we should be documenting those efforts in the contact log. So there's multiple ways that we can have, we can show that we've made the attempts. And if I'm looking at this law correctly, it's saying, separate offense after 2 reasonable attempts, notify the parent, the school system will send written notice. So we've made 2 reasonable attempts, whether it's a call, whether it's an email, whether it's of course, the Everyday Labs letters. And then the second letter will have to be an actual letter according to this law.
Okay. I think my concern is that that the attempts to contact not be just checking a box. It feels like if we are going to solve the problem of a student's chronic absence, that we need to actually contact the parent and not just be able to send some automatic letters and then say we tried. Because
Agreed.
we need to engage with that parent to figure out what the root causes of the absences are and provide support both for the importance of attendance, but also to remove any barriers to attendance that the student may be experiencing. And all of that has got to have the help of the caregiver, the adult caregiver.
Agreed. And so that's why now there are some situations where we're not getting return calls or no responses to the emails or what have you. And so that's why that no contact letter is in place for situations where we're not getting a response. So I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Okay.
Can I add to that,
And
please?
Briscoe Brown, if I may add, I'm sorry, Alicia, if I may
Yes,
add,
ma'am.
once we've exhausted all those options as it relates to calling and sending letters, we do go knocking on doors, so we do have home visits in place as well.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. And I wanted to add, as far as for the purpose of if we happen to have to refer outside of the school system for punitive measures, by law, we do have to notify them by first class mail. That's 3 and the 5-day letter. The 5-day letter has the law. It reiterates what the law requires. So if we're going that route, that 3 and 5-day letter needs to be sent out. All other letters are just courtesy notices that we're sending to update parents on where their students are with absences and what supports we can offer them.
Good. All right, thank you. I don't have anything further right now.
Thank you, Board Member Brown. I had a couple questions, and if Chair Mitchell has any questions, please let us know in the chat so I can make sure that you're heard. What disciplinary actions are we imposing, if any, due to absences?
School level?
Go ahead.
At the school level, even at the district level, at some point it activates unenrollment. So I'm just curious, what is our response?
So it shouldn't activate unenrollment until we have exhausted those tiered supports. That's where that's where the legislation is trying to ensure, although we don't expel students, we're to intervene early. So that means that we're using those tiered supports to go and address the students who are absent and trying to get to what the barriers or what the root causes are. If we get to a place where students are still not responding or parents are not responding to those interventions or our outreach, then for students who are in middle and high school under age 16, we refer to juvenile court for a truancy complaint. But as far as the school level, there's no specific consequence, and we should not be withdrawing them unless we've exhausted all tiered supports. And for those under 16, as I mentioned, we have to refer for a truancy complaint.
Do we
If
have
they're
any
older,
data? Do we have any data of any students being suspended or put in in-school suspension due to absences? And I would even say including, I guess, skipping, right? Like you showed up to first period, second period, you didn't show up to third period, fourth period. Like, how does that play in?
So
into
skipping we address as a behavior. And it's addressed through what used to be called the Whole Child Intervention Team. I'm getting used to the APS SST. But so now it should be addressed through that because it is not considered, if they showed up to school but refused to go to class, it should not be addressed as an attendance concern. It's a behavior. I do want to go back to, those withdrawal questions, and then I'm going to come back to your other question. So especially if we know that students still live in our attendance area, we should not be withdrawing those students. We should be addressing that in another way, and basically what Alicia Curvey just shared. I'll go back to what Dr. Ford shared in terms of the home visits. The social workers should be getting those referrals to make those home visits, especially for those students that we know still live in our attendance area or not. If they don't live in our attendance area, the school social worker has made that home visit and can confirm that. Most times they can. Then of course, but if they still live in the attendance area, we have a multitude of other things using a tiered intervention, if you will, to address that. Going back in terms of the in-school suspension, I'm quite sure that some of our schools are using that for our students who are skipping, but we're also providing some behavior strategies to address that as a behavior. The data collection, we as school social work department, we don't keep that data. It may be kept with our discipline department. So I can't speak to whether or not the data is being collected, since that's not something social work services is collecting.
Yeah, just a
So, go ahead.
well, just a brief point of clarity. If the question is if you are absent, are we using per se traditional discipline from the standpoint of suspending or ISS? We absolutely are not, because we want you in school, I think to the point, skipping's a different conversation because you were actually in school and then you chose to do something different during the time you were supposed to be in whatever class. But if you're not coming to school, we're not going to suspend you or send you to ISS. We're going to try to get you in school. And then I think to the point, go through the tiers and ultimately you got the truancy conversation and the reference to court. That's a reality for some.
Is there a threshold number of absences, and having exhaust all the things? I'm just genuinely curious, how many kids have we had to adjudicate because of chronic absenteeism? How many students have we had to unenroll, if you will? And correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is if a student just does not show up anymore, and we are not able to confirm where that child is, if that they're enrolled in another district, whatever, that we just never confirm where that child is, that child does count against our graduation rate. And so I'm curious as to what percentage of our graduation rate is impacted by these cases specifically. And I guess that's what I'm trying to tease out of these questions is getting to, A, what is the impact, and B, what are we doing when it does happen?
So we do have Senate Bill, it used to be Senate Bill 530, but now it's law, where school social workers can make a report to DFACS if a student has been withdrawn 45 days or more without notice of what school they have been enrolled in. So we do have that, and we follow up with that team, to get additional information about what they were able to find out. That's one of the things that we have working for us. Plus, we make those home visits to try to confirm the address and whether or not they're still in the attendance area. In terms of, being withdrawn and how that affects the graduation rate, I'm going to say that if we are not able to determine where that child is, even with those efforts, the home visit, this what was formerly known as House Bill 530, working with Division of Family and Children's Services, that is considered a dropout. We do have APS graphs, which shows us those students who fall in that range, and that's a report that can be easily pulled. I don't know if I answered all of your questions.
No, you did. I didn't think that anybody was going to be able to pull that number out like on the spot, but I think it's worthy to know. Because I think we're in one of those positions where a point or 2 points counts for a whole lot. And I think to have real honest understanding of it, because I see it every day at my school, especially towards the end of the school year. I see administrators fighting, trying to find kids as you're coming up to your final graduation numbers. And I'm wondering, as a district, what our visibility is on that, because I think there's points on the table there.
Can I share that we can pull the withdrawal reports and look at those codes? The unknown code is one that can definitely highlight a need to drill down and see what's going on. Lack of attendance is the other. So we can use those reports to see what's going on with those students to ensure, one, that they weren't just withdrawn simply for lack of attendance or they really missing. I believe we can also use SLDS if they're registered in another area to try to find where they are, because not all the time students enroll in other schools that we receive that information back to know that they've enrolled in another school for whatever reason. So there are ways that we can try to drill down, and that can be some work that we do with DART as one of our subcommittees to review that data and see if we can come up with some numbers and some alignment of strategies for schools.
And then my last one was just around Early Lab Pro, Everyday Lab Pro. Heard some positive things about the impact. I was just curious what the unique impact of that initiative has been, and if we're able to quantify what the impact has been since adopting it. I heard notifications, but I'm wondering what unique benefits we've gotten that we wouldn't have otherwise.
So for me, if you don't mind, so for me, for last year, before our truancy letters were sent out by Everyday Labs, they were doing our text and email notifications. Parents could opt out. I believe we had fewer than 50 parents to opt out. I can get an exact number for that. Also, it helped to raise awareness for our parents to see where their students fell, no matter what absence they were on, whether it's an excused, an illness, a suspension. It just highlights and raises awareness, because a child could be out every Monday for a month and they don't realize that's for absences. So it helped raise awareness. It made parents contact schools to check in on attendance. It helped improve or increase the parent portal access, so parents can look at attendance on their own. But they have evidence-based data that supports how those interventions help us. Also, there's a part of a resource, kind of two-way, for parents to click in if they're having issues economically, if they're having issues maybe needing mental health supports, that they can alert through that two-way, and then it will let one of us know at the district level who to reach out to and align them with the social worker or counselor at their school. As far as the truancy letters, it's definitely a plus, and we'll get to see how much impact that's made at the end of the year, unfortunately, because at this point of the year, we're just making sure that everyone's getting it out. But we know 100% of those students that need to have letters and we have the correct addresses, they are being mailed out. The previous issues we'd had with manpower of mailing letters was not enough paper, not enough ink, not enough stamps, not enough envelopes. So this process is getting out more letters for our schools than we've ever been able to do manually. And it also highlights if a student lives in an apartment and there's an apartment number missing, it's letting us know that that apartment number is missing. And when it's put into Infinite Campus, that letter goes out the next day. So it's definitely increasing our manpower and raising more awareness because parents are getting their letters, and just making parents understand more of the impact that students' attendance is making on them.
Thank you. That's it for my questions. I just had one ask, and this is, I think, more for Ms. Long. That in the future, there were a lot of policy suggestions, like in the presentation. I'll be curious if it would be possible to maybe get potential policy language, like to go along with those ahead of time, instead of coming back to it again next month, having waited. At least this way, we could have put it on first read, or at least been able to think on it over the course of the next month instead of waiting to see
Sure.
and then having
Yes,
that moment.
of course. But we can also spend a couple of minutes, you all as a committee, looking at those policy suggestions and discussing among yourselves which of those you feel are appropriate for addition to the policy itself. I think that Dr. Anthony and team have laid out why they need this in policy. For one, including language that defines the key attendance terms. We can add the definition for chronic absence, meaning missing 10% or more of enrolled school days for any reason. Assuming that you all are okay with those additions. We can include language that aligns around the chronic absence review team and how that impacts the specific schools that have the high absenteeism rate of 15% or higher. The policy itself can include reference to Georgia's compulsory school attendance law, as well as including language that aligns with attendance practices for that NCSS tiered support. In general, as a committee, do you all feel that these are appropriate inclusions for the policy for when you take a look at the language next month?
Yeah, I don't have any problem with any of these. I feel like maybe the third bullet point, the include Georgia's compulsory school attendance law and the eligibility for enrollment law, can probably more efficiently be handled by cross-reference at the bottom of the policy rather than, than citing the actual law. But certainly to the extent that we need to include language that aligns with current Georgia law, that's obvious. And I'm actually a little surprised that we don't define those key attendance terms. I confess we haven't been over this policy in.
We just went over it last year, I think. Because we had that whole conversation around if we should give excused absences for college visits.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's probably one that we have to touch every year as the state tries to address attendance. So.
Prior
Is there a
to-
limit to the number of definitions? Because we had a few others. Truancy is one. Many get confused between chronic absenteeism and truancy. What an unexcused absence is.
There's no
Perfect.
limit,
Okay.
but we do prefer that our policies not get too long or too wordy, just because then they become more difficult for the community to absorb. And also, the more you put in a policy, the more opportunity there is for violation of it. So if
And-
the policy should be the sort of the 30,000-foot view. And then we get down to the ground level in the regulations has always been sort of the philosophy of our policies.
But I think your presentation strikes a good balance of talking about the importance of having some things on that 30,000 view level so that the entire community has an understanding of expectations and what's important.
Yes.
Thank you.
One question did come to mind. Do we have a number of how many non-responses we've had?
To the letters or?
So we've exhausted all tiers. We've tried to reach out via letter, phone, smoke signal, door knocking, dog walkers. Couldn't get them. Do we have a number?
For this year, not a number
No.
yet. It's still a work in progress. Last year, we'd have to tease that out for you.
If we could get last year's number, that because what I would like is a baseline. Because I'm looking at the numbers. I went trying to dig in the archives to see where we were. I see pre-pandemic, we're at 15%. So that's kind of our baseline where you want to get back to. You've got just after we spike up to 38%, 35%, 31%. And I've got a lot of questions, and I'm expecting, especially as we've made real financial investments in chronic absenteeism around, some supports. And what I would like to see is that number come down. And what I saw, just based on the numbers, is that we've actually increased from last year. And correct me if I'm wrong, because again, I'm sorry, last year was 31.2, I thought. And then now we're saying we are at 34.5.
No, that was
No.
2024 school year.
It's chronic absenteeism got better this year by
Okay.
about 3 or 4
Yes.
points. But
2 years
to
in a
the
row.
to the point, yeah, it's been consecutive years. But to the point, it's still significantly higher than it was pre-pandemic. And I think a couple of things contextually, like nationally, most districts have not returned to pre-pandemic level, in particular in urban school districts. It's a real challenge. We got to figure that out. But I would also say, in regards to the Metro Atlanta footprint, APA, we've got work to do. And so, we improved, the district has improved 2 years consecutively. There are some green shoots from the standpoint of positives, but there's a lot of work still to be done.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, well, our next steps are for you all to see for a second reading next month, additions to the policy language going beyond what was recommended by the Georgia School Board Association to include 3 of the specific items that our team has come up with as a social work team, and 1 of the items as a cross-reference to state law. So you'll see that language at your next committee meeting. Thank you, Dr. Anthony. Thank you, Ms. Curvey. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, back on the agenda of policy changes, we continue to work through some of the items that were resulting from the legislative session earlier this year. But before we get to those 2 that are still out there, I wanted to bring up the revisions for final approval to your board regulation on the Student Advisory Council. This is a regulation where you put work into providing an avenue for student representation on the Atlanta Board of Education. Let me share my screen to lift that up. These are the edits that you talked about last month and approved for first reading. One would be to the provision around eligibility for Student Advisory Council members. You're adding a bullet to the duties of those SAC members that they serve as a non-voting member of the Atlanta Board of Education.
Thank you.
And here's that work that you all spent quite a bit of time on over the past few months, along and in collaboration with the SAC and their advisors, looking into the substance of how students would provide representation on the Board of Education. the scope of that participation through the work sessions, policy committee meetings, the format of participation, eligibility and selection for serving as a student board member, orientation and support offered to the participating student board members, as well as reporting and feedback to one another, to the other SAC delegates, and policy oversight and review. And the full board looked at this policy and approved it for first reading at its September meeting.
Thank you. Board Member Brown?
Yeah, is Dr. CT with us? I can't tell from the screen.
Yes, I am. Hello, everyone.
Hi, thank you. Have you been through this with the Student Advisory Council and, oh, we just lost everybody. Been through this with the Student Advisory Council, and have they approved the structure of this?
So yes, this was a recommendation from them from last year's
Right.
cohort. Some have graduated, and then we're not at the point where we have recommendations for this year's cohort, but this conversation has been broached multiple times by those groups.
Okay, but you're comfortable because at least in one place here it says, this policy shall be implemented and overseen by the SAC advisors, and that's you.
You got work to do.
Yes, myself and
I just want to make sure you're on
along
board.
with Keith Glass.
Yeah, you and Keith.
Oh, yes. We have been involved in the language of this, Keith and I, along with Board Member Brooks. And so, yes, we are fully aware and actually drafted some of the verbiage as well, along with Board Member Brooks.
Okay.
My only question is on the language under scope and participation, second bullet, policy committee meetings. If we need to put the possibility for a substitute to be appointed from the Student Advisory Council in the event that the consistent member is not able to attend the meeting, if we wanted to include that.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that's a great idea.
And as the monthly work session says a delegate, so I think that kind of leaves it open anyway. So that one's kind of fine how it is. But that was my only feedback. I'm not as good as CBB. I didn't catch any commas or typos or anything.
I think we could just say a consistent SAC delegate or designee,
I like that.
Yep.
so that if the regular delegate has to be out, then somebody else can fill in.
Okay. I'll add the words or designee.
Great to have.
Can I
lawyers
ask a
on the team.
question in regards to specifically the policy committee portion? So one of the things is making sure that there is a consistent cadence of the policy committee meetings, and that they're, notified, that students are notified in enough time, just because scheduling, a lot of them are duly enrolled. So they kind of have almost a college schedule, but we want to be able to set them up for success, where it's not like, a week in advance. Well, we can at least give them 3, maybe 4 weeks, preferably, to notify them of those meetings.
I agree with that. I had to give a big shout out to our board executive director, Mr. Michael Wilborn, because he has surely been on us about having dates on the calendar months ahead of time. You have my commitment, and again, we could have changes in January, but you have my commitment that we will attempt to schedule policy committee meetings well in advance, at least 5-6 months out. So that we can have it on calendar, especially for, fall semester, spring semester. Summer might not be as contingent, but yeah. But you have my commitment on behalf of that. And I guess I have questions, like, should it be in policy that meetings are scheduled in a certain kind of cadence or?
We had a board norm for years that And it never rose to the level of policy because we mostly observed it. That committee meetings took place on the third Thursday of every month. And that if you needed to have a committee meeting, you would have it on the third Thursday, except in very exceptional circumstances. We have drifted away from that over the years, and I would encourage the board to move back towards a consolidated committee meeting day. I think it aids the community in knowing in advance, and in this case, the Student Advisory Council members knowing in advance when to expect committee meetings to occur. I also this is purely anecdotal from having been in committee meetings for years, but it encourages more board members to attend more meetings. Because if you're here for a meeting at noon, a policy committee meeting at noon, you're more likely to attend an audit committee meeting at 10 and a budget committee meeting at 2. And so I think it encouraged engagement both by the community in our committee meetings and board members. And so I think it also set up an expectation that meetings would happen monthly, which is something else that I perceive as having slid.
Yeah,
over
I
the
don't.
years.
I don't have an issue with the norm. I think the one thing we'll have to be contingent on is, especially around policy committee, because it'll be a consistent student. It's just what their schedule is and what their needs are, and then trying to be flexible towards that. So I definitely have heart for, I think, centering the students' availability to make the schedule for, if it is the third Thursday, just what time that third Thursday. Yeah.
Only thing I would point out is I count 4 committees by the time you do audit, board development, policy, and
third
budget.
Thursday.
Well, no, it's fine, but I'm just saying you got to start at 8 and go. I mean, because there are, so just something to note there.
Policy was at 8 o'clock in the morning. And we went on from there, and some of us were here all day as a result. But honestly, it was easier to come down here once and do all of them.
Well, especially
than
from
have to
Buckhead.
than have to go back and forth. It was easier to plan for administrative purposes because administration knew that committee meetings would be on the third Thursday of the month, and so could block that out and avoid school visits or other commitments on that day, which then left board members freer to participate in other activities on days that were not committee meeting days. So I saw it as having a lot of benefit and would just encourage the board to explore going back to that.
Well, thank you so much. Did you have any other input on the proposed changes?
No, I think this is well done, and as long as Keith Glass and Dr. CT are on board and ready to implement it, I think we're good, and would recommend that we pass it on for, I guess it needs final approval, Erica
Yep, it would be
Long?
fine. It would be final approval.
Okay.
Yes, with that change to the adding or designee.
And then when do we expect to have our first student representatives at the board meeting and at policy review?
I would say January. That gives us time to kind of get our students kind of ready, have that identified person. I have someone in mind based on their schedule and their availability and transportation, because we did talk about that previously, but I want to hear from the students and the delegates specifically after this has been approved formally.
I would suggest that we think about holding off until February, just because the January board meeting includes
Oh, yes.
a swearing in, it includes
You're
election
right.
of officers. It's a very unusual board meeting. It typically requires more executive session, more confidential information because of new board members.
Understood.
So it might, just to avoid the chaos of January, it might be best to start them in February.
Would you be?
Yes, ma'am. And I'll have them watch, I'll have them view the January one.
Yeah.
Just thinking about as you're coming into some of your last committee meetings, would you be opposed to us trying to get a student committee member by December? As one of the last actions you'll have is having help to create that opportunity.
We often don't have committee meetings in December.
Okay.
So, I'm not opposed to doing it at the November meeting, but I don't know that with the holidays and everything, it can be, and this year with elections, it can be hard to do that.
Understood.
But I would certainly not, I would not oppose that, let's say.
I'm just putting it out there, like at least you know.
And this will be voted on in November, so.
Correct.
So it will be policy by the first week in November.
Yep. Something to think about. I mean, I guess we can
Okay.
see where we are around then, and if there is a need. Dr. Johnson sounds like he's ready for Christmas break. All right. Ms. Long, if you're ready for the next item.
Okay, thank you. The next item up is revisions to policy IFBG, Internet Acceptable Use. These are revisions that result from work of the legislature actually back in 2024, where they passed a bill addressing online safety for children. And there was quite a bit of back and forth, and even I think there was even some litigation around some of the provisions of the bill. But what we're left here is just a change to our policy. One, and we're asking that you approve this for final approval. You saw these edits previously for first read. One change would include an insertion of language that any computers belonging to the school district equipped with internet access shall be subject to a technology protection measure as defined in the Children's Internet Protection Act of 2000. We changed the very outdated reference to the internet and the World Wide Web. Cynthia, I think that was your suggestion, and it would just say monitoring online activities as defined in this policy. Another insertion provides for the monitoring of the online activity of users and the use of the chosen technology protection measure to protect against access to stuff that folks shouldn't be accessing. Establishing appropriate enforcement measures in response to such violations, and including age-appropriate instruction regarding safe and appropriate behavior on social networking sites. This part about the age-appropriate instruction was a key part of the legislative discussion around this bill almost 2 years ago. And the State Department of Education has provided and is putting together supports and resources to districts around that age-appropriate cyber safety instruction. And then, of course, adding just, the regular catch-all language, authorizing the superintendent to develop administrative regulations. Again, this is language that was suggested by the GSBA. Dr. Henderson Rosser is aligned with the language itself, and she says it aligns with our practices. And this helps to close out a legislative initiative that was first passed back in 2024. And there are other provisions from that bill. There are other policy changes that you will be looking at in the upcoming months, including development of a new student social media policy. But we're asking that this portion of it, internet acceptable use, be approved for final approval.
Thank you so much. Board Member Brown, Briscoe Brown.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with any of these. I would just note that as an attorney, it always makes me a little nervous to include obscenity, child pornography, or harmful to minors in a policy without defining what those are, but that's because of that's because of the law school training. And which leads me to the question, did the State General Assembly in its infinite wisdom attempt to define those words?
Well, the definitions and the questions around that language was a big part of the debate at the legislature. and I don't think they got to a point where they felt they could define them and sort of kicked it and punted that responsibility. But then in turn, the Georgia School Board Association model language itself does not include those definitions. I, of course, understand your hesitancy. I think it is one of those questions that at some point, hopefully not for our district, but at some point it will be a question that will have to get answered by a court somewhere down the line.
And that's what concerns me, obviously, that, you know, there's Justice Rehnquist's famous comment about, I can't define obscenity, but I know it when I see it.
Right.
And I'm less concerned about that than the one about harmful to minors, because my definition of harmful may be very different from someone else's. And I understand we need to include the language that that state law says we need to include. But I'm just expressing my concern that this language from the General Assembly is going to set us and other districts and ultimately the state up for litigation.
Yes, well, your concerns are right in line with the debate and the discussion at the time, not just among legislators, but even among advocates representing school districts and other education agencies who were able to point out then that as discussed, as considered, those terms would present challenges.
Okay, but I'm fine with the changes as presented.
Yeah, I would just want to put on the record, I encourage us as a district to take serious the opportunity to lean into internet literacy, internet safety, internet citizenship. I think it is the most important missed opportunity in our education system right now, just across the board nationwide. Teaching who's telling our kids not to post that thing? Who's telling our kids the credibility of a news source over Wikipedia, right? Like, and you might get a blurb about it in English class, but having a real hyper focus on it, as well as like opportunities via the internet. I just think it's so many positive things we could potentially do with that, that I would encourage us to really explore. Now, my one concern with this bill, as I originally read the bill, and I hear that GSBA is gathering resources to help schools, but I actually thought, because this bill, if you're not in compliance, does give the state the opportunity to defund the entire district. And nobody talked about that provision either in the debate, which I found interesting. But I felt like there could be an argument that if a district did not create like a course or a class, that you could potentially be in violation of the law. And so what I'm hearing is kind of like, well, maybe it doesn't have to be a class, but we just have to make sure we give some resources, and that kind of checks the box. And what I'm saying is even if that is true, I would encourage us to do more than that, because I think the issue is so important in these modern times, and I think our young people are not given any guidance as students as to how to navigate the internet, and I'd like to see us do that.
I'm going to bring up again the WABE pilot program that was really incredibly successful and effective on digital citizenship, which included lessons about cyberbullying, but also about critical reading of social media, of, you know, just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's true. And really learning to be digital citizens in a 21st century world. And so I'm just gonna, as a board member of WABE as well as this board, I'm just going to lift that program up yet again, because I think it does everything you're talking about and more.
Yeah, if especially an in-house partner, somebody we can lean on for it, I fully support it. I don't know how, I just know that. And so I appreciate.
And that said, I recommend we do this all.
Yeah. Is there somebody
talking?
Are you saying something, Ms. Long?
No, I'm not.
Okay. I agree with Board Member Briscoe Brown. I think we are in support of moving this ahead.
Wonderful, thank you. And that won't go into much detail, but I will say Dr. Henderson Rosser and her team are on top of all of the things related to instructional technology, artificial intelligence, and they know and they see the possibilities out there for students, and they're working now on putting together the right resources for them to make sure they're not missing out on what they can get from these new technologies.
Thank you. All right, do you have the next item for us?
Yes, the next policy up for what we hope would be final approval also stems from legislative action. This is your policy around parental involvement in education. During this past year's session, HB 268, the comprehensive school safety legislation, included requirements around parental notice that we are requesting that you make revision to your parental involvement in education policy in order to capture those notice provisions. Let me share my screen here. You saw these for first reading previously at your September meeting, and it just lays out those safety related items where parents are provided notice by the district, coming from that school safety legislation, procedures for a parent to review records related to their child and request transfer of records to another school or entity, procedures for parents to learn about their minor child's course of study, including parental access to instructional materials, and procedures for parents to raise their hand and object to those materials, parental opt-out related to the school's sex education curriculum, parental opt-out procedures related to photographs, video, or voice recordings, and procedures related to the timely production of a student's education records to another school. That last provision, that producing records to another school, shortened the time frame for our student records department to do that work, but it is requirement by law and they are putting it in place.
You have anything, Board Member Brown?
This looks fine to me.
Yeah, I do believe we brought up some conversation around explaining the opt-out for photographs and videos, just that nowhere in our policy do we explain that you are opted in, but we do explain that you can opt out. And so I'm not sure if this policy is the appropriate place, and that perhaps in some other policy is where we need to clarify that, but I know we did discuss this, and so I'm just curious if
we did. Yes, we did. And communications has done work even at the very beginning of this school year around what were previously some conflicting forms with the photography opt-out, and making sure that we were being consistent across the board. I think it's probably better handled in terms of that school and district communication directly to parents around what that form means, what the default posture is. Remember that we talked about the default posture, that every student is available for photography, for videography, and then opting out of that default. I would worry about putting those specifics around our practices into this policy, just because as things change, as technology changes, as the needs of an individual school might change, we may want to shift from having that form within Infinite Campus and within the student handbook to some other application or some other tool. And I wouldn't want the ability of the administration to make those changes to have to be subject to review by the board policy, a review of the board policy.
Thank you. All right, I think we're good on this one. Chair Mitchell, did you have any input? I see a hand raised, so I think we're good.
No, I don't have any input. I'm just listening at the moment.
All right, thank you.
And I'll just add that under this school safety legislation, boards must update this policy every year by June 1st. So we'll lock in these changes here, and then the policy will need to be updated again by June 1st of each year.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Will this count as our June 1st of 2026, or is this late for June 1st of 2025?
So June 1st of 2025 was technically impossible, simply because the law did not go into effect until July 1st of 2025. So you all are working at your earliest opportunity now, but you will need to give another review or consideration of the policy by June 1st of next year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the next policy up, this would be for first reading. This is recommended changes to your policy around school attendance zones. And the thought is that we would bring some language that aligns with the current long-term, long-range facilities master planning work that's happening now. And just to make sure we're putting in policy the district's standpoint and the district's philosophy around making potential changes to school attendance zones. Our team, working with the consultants, spent a lot of time reviewing policies from across the country, from across Metro Atlanta, just to see what other practices are from a board policy standpoint around the setting of school attendance zones. So you'll see here the potential insertion of fairly broad language. First would be language saying that attendance zones are used to ensure that each school within a district maintains a balanced number of students, reduce overcrowding, and ensure appropriate utilization of school resources. School attendance zone lines may be revised as needed to reduce overcrowding at existing schools and to set attendance zones for new schools. And this is language that we actually saw in another Metro Atlanta school district.
Thank you. Board Member Briscoe Brown?
Yes, we have in the past had a policy that small shifts in attendance zones can be accomplished by administration without board vote. Is it the intent of this policy to eliminate all board vote on school rezoning decisions?
No, ma'am. No, not at all.
Okay.
And that the policy, the practice around those small shifts is still in place. I think we actually just brought one to the board last month related to maybe the Folsom industrial area. But no, the intention of this policy change is to provide some clarity to the community and to stakeholders around the purpose for setting attendance zones and some of the potential purposes for looking at revisions to attendance zones. So just making it clear that we want to have that balanced number of students, we want to reduce overcrowding and ensure appropriate utilization of school resources. But you'll notice even that language is fairly high level. We're not talking about school population. We're not talking about capacity rates. There are no numbers or percentages. But just to remind the community that the district sees a responsibility to maintain a balance of population and a reduction of overcrowding and an appropriate utilization of resources across the district.
Okay. Second question, in the second large insert of language where it describes elementary, middle, and high schools should be large enough to do a list of things. Under middle schools, it says middle schools should have an enrollment large enough to provide special area teachers in art, music, home economics, and industrial arts. I'm all for art and music.
We still got home ec?
We don't still have home ec, and we haven't had home ec in decades.
Bring it back.
And I would also argue that industrial arts may be somewhat outdated language. If what we're trying to say there is career pathways, it might be best to use the updated language, because I don't want us to feel like we're enacting a policy that then requires every school to institute a home economics class.
Yeah, and we have a neighboring district that still uses this as their policy language. I think it's probably best that we say to provide special area teachers and maybe a parenthetical that lists out art, music, career pathways, etc.
Yeah, and
then
maybe even say including but not limited to,
yes,
because that
exactly.
provides a broader read that might align better with both our signature programs and the needs of each individual school.
That's right.
And I guess I have a question too, just around like the elementary school side. That when we're saying like that there should be music, art specifically, we're not saying that it has to be a full-time teacher. We're not binding
No.
ourselves to that.
No.
Okay.
No. We're not dictating that part. But it is, we are saying we want a robust elementary experience for sure. And contextually, this runs adjacent to the consideration of the comprehensive facility planning that is going on and serves as these proposed additions, however refined and made better, serve as, in effect, a springboard to administrative regs that will get more granular and specific, such that, you know, incoming boards, incoming superintendents, incoming folks 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, 100 years from now, have a basis to build from for a facilities planning process, et cetera. So this allows us, Erica and Chelsea and kind of the team, Dan, Adam, a great job of working with HPM and looking at current policy to see how it could be broadened to include enough language that speaks to, you know, what the district values from the standpoint of elementary, middle, and high, but doesn't get so granular that it gets into the admin reg part. Right. But I will say there will be, you know, I fully anticipate we'll need a retreat of sorts around other things. One of the conversations would definitely be draft language around administrative regulations for input around, you know, what we think, you know, should be thresholds, whether it's a absolute number or a utilization percentage. Also, you see included in here a say requirement expectation that the superintendent bring forward every year, an update on utilization across the district when you get to facilities.
Do you have any energy on when that should be? And I think about that in respect to making sure that a superintendent doesn't give it to you like 2 months before East Blos vote, right? Like that it's thought about at the right time period.
Yeah. So because East Blos isn't every year, I'm careful about maybe we can add some language and we can take this back, you know, and say in years that, you know, are East Blos, you know, maybe we can add some language that creates enough of a window, whether it's a year, 6 months, 9 months, whatever it is, that does button up the East Blos part. Because I do think, to the point, excuse me, one of the things that we've gotten questions about as we've, you know, had conversation in the community is, well, you all made this investment in this building, now you're coming back saying that the goal has been, going through this facilities planning process, is to plan and then go through East Blos process and use the information from this plan to inform the East Blos. So I do think that's a good point to add, excuse me, some language around, in years that there is an East Blos, that report should be, you know, X amount of months, 9 months or whatever it is, prior to, you know, the East Blos process commencing.
I would appreciate that, because I think that would show that we are being responsive to the community who are seeing us having to make tough decisions after big investments have already been made. Board Member Brown, Briscoe Brown, you have something to say?
Yeah, not about that. I agree with you. Also, we probably would not want to have that report until after leveling
That's right.
in October of every year.
Is
So-
it worth it to say that in language as well, so that we're working with firm numbers?
Again, I tend to prefer to keep policies at a 30,000 foot level, so that we don't then have to go back and change them. But if we included some language, maybe we even just could say on an annual basis, as affected by, growth patterns and local conditions, the superintendent shall report. I want to go back to the list of elementary, middle, and high schools should have enrollments, and just ask that we include similar language at the high school level as to what we've done for middle and elementary. And that's to specifically provide for
All of it.
all of it, and
All of it,
extracurriculars in particular, because we all know that we have had schools that have had to, for instance, discontinue marching band for lack of students, or not had enough to field a particular sports team. And so if we could just make the high school language mirror
Middle and elementary.
mirror the middle and elementary language as far as both the counseling and support personnel and also the comprehensive programs.
I agree with
Will
you.
do.
Yeah, and I wonder, since the language is so similar, I wonder if it's not almost one bullet, almost.
I think it probably
that says
it may
elementary,
well be.
middle, and high shall, and then whatever nuance is necessary for secondary. I do think the delineation isn't a bad thing, but you know what I mean. Like there are so many. Like you're going to do exceptional ed at every level. We're going
Only
to do
sports, I think.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
at elementary,
At the
you're not
secondary
doing as
level, we're
much.
doing sports.
Yeah.
Yeah, got it. Okay. So it'll probably take us down to 2 bullets possibly, but one being a universal one for each school level, and then the second probably just being for middle and high together.
Right. Because I think middle and high only has the nuance of intramural sports, and I think that's it.
Yeah. Okay. So I will work on those changes. And we have enough time to make the edits and make them available to board members if you all would want to move this edited version along for first reading.
I'm for that.
I am as well. I get one other question. Did we, and again, it might be pinning us down too much, but did we want to define what balanced means? 'Cause I did have a question mark on that.
I think that's you know it when you see it.
Okay.
I wonder if, and I just wonder if in order to provide maximum flexibility in decision-making for the superintendent and team, if we maybe want to keep that one general.
It sounded to me like the conversation around thresholds really kind of defines our ethos around what balance means to us. So I hear that. Okay.
And I would like to see this moved on for first read in November and final approval in December, because I think it dovetails so neatly with our vote on.
Got to get it done. Yeah,
On the plan.
I agree.
Okay. Well, I'll make the edits that we've discussed and send them out to you as a committee and upload them to Assembly by tomorrow.
Okay.
And then that way they will be available for the entire board in your one-on-one meetings.
Thank you.
I
I think we have one more item.
Yeah, just one more fairly simple revision to the bullying policy to bring it in line with state law, which asks that we carve out cyberbullying. Cyberbullying is already contemplated by our student code of conduct. It is not a new concept to us as a district in terms of the code of conduct and our everyday practices around school safety and student safety. I mean, we know that cyberbullying is real and it's not new, but the newly enacted legislation does require us to reference cyberbullying. So you'll see here just the slightest change possible to board policy JCDAG, and that would just be including the phrase as we define the term bullying, which means an act which occurs on school property, on school vehicles, at designated school bus stops, or at school-related functions or activities, comma, and includes cyberbullying, the use of data or software that is accessed through a computer system, network, or other electronic technology provided by the Atlanta Public Schools. And I've checked with student discipline. They're fine with this. We're already accounting for and addressing cyberbullying incidents, but they are comfortable with the change to the language.
Yes. Board Member Briscoe Brown, do you have any feedback on this major change?
None whatsoever.
Okay. I guess I would be in support in moving this on to final approval. I don't see any reason to hold it up.
Do we need to do that? I mean, I don't have a problem with it. It's what, 3 words?
Yeah. Unless we would just want to talk about it again next month. Can we just move it along?
Yeah, I agree with moving it on. I think you can send an email update to the full board, just let them know the policy change or addition.
Thank you. So I hear 2 in support. Board Member Briscoe Brown, are you in support or not of moving this?
We can move it forward. We have typically reserved waiving first read for things that need to be done in an expeditious manner, but this is such a small change that I don't know that we need community input on it. The significance of that is that waiving first read means we don't have that 30-day official comment period.
Understood.
And I'm always reluctant to shut down public comment,
Fair.
but I don't think this one is likely to incite large amounts of public comment. So.
Does it, and I'm just asking for historical reference, does it make a difference if it's something to put us in alignment and compliance of law?
Not typically, and Erica Long, please jump in if I'm incorrect here. I think the purpose of the 30-day public comment period is to make the public aware of the policies that we're enacting and get suggested changes, revisions. We sometimes have community members who catch typos that even I don't find. and
Who is this person?
and of course, we do sometimes get significant public comment from members of the community. Again, I don't know that this one in particular, given what we're doing, is going to yield any public comment at all. But as long as we remember that is why we have first read and final approval.
Yes, ma'am.
And we don't take lightly the waiving of that.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
But timing wise, you're well within the deadline for making this policy change that was set by the legislation. And I think, the community interest was probably some years back when we first started protecting students from cyberbullying, but I think that's a cultural norm and expectation at this point where there's nothing controversial about adding that word cyberbullying.
The only controversial thing is why it's taken us so long, but.
Talk about it. Well, it's a new day. We got it done. So thank you for that. Did you have anything else, Ms. Long, that we needed to discuss?
No, I think we're good. Yes, thank you all for your attention to these revisions.
Well, thank you so much for putting it together. Thank you, even in just how we're receiving things with the printouts, with the changes in red. Like, it is very much appreciated and a lot easier to understand the shifts and changes that we're making. So thank you for that. Do we have any discussion of upcoming policies for review or consideration? Any other business?
No, I'm good. I just added in Assembly, you have that chart, just a refresher of where we are in terms of our policies that have our policy changes that result from the latest round of legislation, as well as some other policy changes that we have identified as a district. And you'll see there the timetable of what we plan to bring next. One of the next big ones will be the continued change to the student electronic device policy. By January, we will need to have our policy updated to move beyond the phones, but include all personal devices, tablets, e-readers, glasses, all kinds of gadgets.
Okay. All right. Let's see. I guess just moving on to upcoming meetings. Our next upcoming meeting is scheduled already. Yay. For Tuesday, November 11th at 12. So again, thank you, Michael, for keeping us in order and setting the date ahead of time. And I guess we need to talk among Ms. Long if there is a need for a December meeting or not. If there's anything we feel is pertinent or pressing. I guess before we say there won't be a meeting, I'd just love to hear from, and we could talk about it offline from my colleagues on the committee as to whether or not we do it. And then perhaps we might need to have a conversation with Dr. CT that if we do have a December meeting, making sure that we have a student rep for that meeting. Other than that, I guess we're talking February for the formal, the big boy meeting. But potentially, and I was just really, honestly, I'm the sentimental value thinking about Cynthia coming to the sunset of her illustrious career on the board and thinking that maybe she might want to have the experience of having a student board member before leaving. Yeah.
That's thoughtful of you, and if we could make that work, it would be great.
Yeah. Even if we just come in just to talk about a policy and leave, we can call it a day. But I'm open to it. If we can make it make sense for Dr. Johnson, we know December. Okay. At this point, are there any community members here for public comment, Mr. Wilbur?
There are no community members for public comment.
All right. I will now entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. So moved by Board Member Briscoe Brown, seconded by Chair Mitchell. All in favor say aye.
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 All right, y'all have a good one. Thank you.
Have a good one.